Hello, everyone. How's everybody doing tonight? I hope that everyone had a great holiday season and that you're all getting in some gaming during that time and had some fun. It's good to be back. We're going to be back on schedule every week. We'll be here now for a while. Just going to be going through our usual things of cool name RPG updates, information about cool games that we've been playing, and a wealth of other incredibly fun, nerdy, geeky stuff for us to talk about. So anyway, let me go ahead and get started. What we're going to be talking about today, there's a few things. Of course, we're going to do our cool name RPG design journal. We're going to let you guys know how it's going, what changes there are, talk a little bit about progress or lack thereof, and let you know where we're at on that. We're also going to be talking a little bit about Marvel Comics, talking about a book called The Power, which was pretty cool. And then we'll have some RPG wisdom as well that hopefully we'll share with all of you. So to start with, I'm going to start with mail call because the mail call this week is gaming related and it's super cool. Let me show you. It is this from Super 7. You may recognize this fellow from the cover of the old Red Box. So they made an action figure of the warrior from the cover of the Red Box. And then along the same lines, but maybe even cooler, is none other than this guy. Yeah, that's right. He's got a little bowl of fire he holds. He can't sit cross-legged. I almost wish he would have come that way, but yeah, you'll recognize him from first edition if you've been gaming as long as I have, or even if you haven't. It's a pretty iconic figure. Now, I'm hoping, got my fingers crossed, that means that we got this guy coming along in the near future, since they're doing all these different cover art retro action figures. So hoping for that as well. As far as game night goes, the guys and I are planning to be continuing with our Cool Name RPG campaign. I'll be giving you guys some updates about how that's going and what we're doing and running into with that. But one thing that I did want to mention is that we have one final round left in our Massive Darkness campaign. We made it all the way to the final battle, and then everyone started getting COVID and stuff, and so we haven't been able to play. Like, you saw the pictures a while ago of the table, like a million minis. It's not something we can play on Zoom like our role-playing games we can, but unfortunately, it's not an option. So we're hopefully going to be finishing that this coming Monday. We'll see how it goes. I'll let you know. All right, so I'm going to start out with one of the things that I know you guys really want to hear about, which is our Cool Name RPG design journal. So I've continued to work on our Cool Name core rule set playtest. So we have a complete playtest people can use to start playing. Now, here's the thing. I'm putting in a lot of stuff that we've play tested lightly, but we're going to be counting on you guys to help us play test with a little bit more oomph to it. Because the reality is that we simply can't get it to you fast enough and test it as much as I normally would. So we're going to work together on this, just like I've always said. We're going to have to tweak it and make changes as we go. One of the most interesting things that I heard recently is I heard an interview with Matt Forbeck, one of our consulting designers. Now, you might remember when the Marvel Comics RPG came out, it had a beta, a playtest beta that they put out for everyone that you could get for like $10, and tons of people got it. Well, about a year later or so, the actual game came out. Between that beta and the actual game coming out, it sounds like Matt actually had to go back and completely redo huge portions of the game based on the feedback they received. This to me is fascinating because it sort of is a great indicator of just how much effort goes into these things and how much they can change when you really start getting them out there into the world and playing them. So again, the moral of the story is I am going to be looking for everyone to really just help chip in and see what they like, what they don't like, and know that we can change anything along the way if it doesn't work. Now, let me talk a little bit about some of the things that we've got coming up. There are a couple of key changes to the core rules, and I want to talk about those just briefly. The first thing I want to talk about is a new term, a couple of new terms called effect and effect type. So as you know, in Cool Name RPG, you find your action score and then roll those dice. And you want to try to get equal to or greater than the difficulty score. Well, we're adding the term of effect, which is how much you've beaten the difficulty score by. So if you have a difficulty score of 5 and you roll an 8, that means that your effect is 3. It's a little it's a little thing, right? I mean, we kind of get it, but you still have to articulate that to the readers, especially knowing that some people won't have played the game in its earlier iterations, or maybe haven't even done a lot of role playing at all, right? So we need to be able to help them sort of compartmentalize and give that a name. And I'll explain in a minute why that's so important. I've also added the idea of effect type. Now, I don't know how much this is going to be used in the core rules. I'm going to include a fair amount of information about it, but I also don't want to get too far into the weeds on details that people don't really want in their games. So, for example, an effect type might be fire or blunt or impact. I was calling it cutting. You know, different types of effects that you could have. Morale, right? Doesn't just have to be physical combat. It's a type of effect. And the reason you have that is that, as we've talked about in the combat, you have armor that reduces the effect. And so different types of armor might have different effects for different impacts on different types. So this armor might be great, and this monster might have armor against physical, but it won't have any armor against, say, mental. Or it might have armor against impact and cutting, but it has less armor against fire because it's, it could be hurt by it more easily. Things like that we're going to be looking at and sharing with you guys. So effect and effect type is something you're going to see as we're going into this. And one of the reasons effect is important is because we're adding the concept of the challenge rating. So in Cool Name RPG, you've got actions, right? I want to go and catch a ball. So someone threw a ball to me and I want to catch it. That's my action check. The game master tells me what the difficulty score for that is, and then I have to roll my dice and get equal to or greater than to catch it. Now, with an action like that, a single roll tells you whether you succeeded or not. It's not like you roll 2 or 3 times to try to catch the ball. You either catch it on that first roll or you don't. However, there's lots of other things where that isn't how the game plays out. And examples are, the most common example is combat, because you've got a monster with scores that go down over time. It takes multiple attacks, maybe by you, maybe by the players as well, other players as well, right? Everyone is working on this, trying to defeat this challenge. And so what we've come up with is this concept of a challenge rating. So any type of action could have a challenge rating. And in one of the examples we have a thief trying to pick a lock. Now, the thief is got 4 rounds because it's being pursued by the guards in the castle that they just recently robbed. And they come around the corner and boom, they run into a locked door. Well, this is a problem, but they are a thief. The guards are 4 rounds behind them. They might have time to get it open and get out of there before the guards catch up. So the GM thinks about it and says, well, the complexity of this lock is about a difficulty score of 6, but it's got these multiple tumblers. So there's extra work that has to go into it. It doesn't make it more complex. It just means you have to do more steps to get it open. So the game master decides that, well, we're going to put a challenge rating of 5 on it. And so what that means is that they need to add up an effect of 5 to reduce the challenge rating down to 0, right? So maybe the first time they get the challenge rating down to 3, then down to 2, then down to 1, and then they unlock the door and they're out and free. So that's the whole idea here, is that we have this concept of a difficulty score, which is complexity, and the challenge rating, which is the magnitude. And when challenge rating reaches 0, you win. That's it. It's not really that complex. It's pretty straightforward. It's just throwing numbers at it. I mean, it's what we do with hit points all the time. So it's really not anything that different. But one of the fun things about this is that it also allows us to create lots of cool non-combat scenarios with their very own challenge ratings. This is something that was really important to everyone when we started this project, was this idea that we wanted to be able to have all sorts of different scenarios where the game still mattered, right? A lot of times, anything that's not combat, suddenly the rules in the game are less important. They aren't as in play. It's not as interactive at that point. It's more storytelling, which is fine, but it also then reduces the perceived value of those encounters. And I think that by having a light system behind that, you can create much more interesting and exciting encounters for the characters. The other thing you do is you create scenarios where players who are not combat focused become just as important as combat focused characters, because each of these types of encounters are going to require different types of skills, and the rules are going to matter in every case. So it's going to matter if nobody is intelligent. It's going to matter if no one has wisdom, right? This is the way that, we're able to make this a richer experience overall. The second piece of this that I'm excited about is this idea that defeating a monster isn't just about beating it until it is dead, right? I mean, that's interesting, but if you think of most of your favorite books and movies and television shows, that's not how they win the fight. They win the fight by doing all sorts of things. Maybe they slow the monster down. Maybe they injure it. Maybe they trick it. Maybe they frighten it. There are all these different things that come into play. But the average role-playing game doesn't really have a simple way to handle that. Well, the idea that we have, and this came out of talks with TBJ, and we talked a little bit about this last time, the idea is that you can actually reduce the challenge rating of a monster in lots of different ways. And so maybe you taunt it, maybe you do, injure it, maybe you trick it. But when you get to 0, you've defeated it. You've won the challenge. You can win that challenge in a lot of different ways. And so this, again, allows us to do that. So the new rules that are coming have this in there. It's going to be a big part of the game. And once we see how everyone likes it, hopefully it'll turn out to be a really great, fun thing. You'll notice in the title, I put, I called it Cool Name Design Journal. Dang, this is hard. Yeah, it really is. And so I've always told you guys I would just tell you about what the experience is like of doing this. And one of the experiences that, even though we have all these great people helping us, we've got a bunch of people on Discord who, by the way, I wasn't able to get on Discord because I had a problem with my account, but I'm back on as of today. So I'll come by and talk to everybody. But we've had a lot of people helping us with this and giving us really great feedback and information. And I've been taking that and trying to coalesce it into a good system, because we didn't just want it to be sort of that hodgepodge of take everybody's ideas and just jam together. We wanted a coherent system that achieved our goals. This has proven to be really hard. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm not pulling it off. I think it's working, but it has turned out to be a lot of work. One of the things, for example, that I found to be really challenging is describing seemingly simple things. When you have to talk about something like an effect, you could say something as simple as the amount you roll over the difficulty score is the effect, and leave it at that. Sometimes that's fine. But what I found is that in my own experience, oftentimes that leaves people uncertain, especially if they haven't played the game before, or they haven't played a lot of games as well. And so I'm spending a lot of time on examples on how things work. I'm spending a lot of time demonstrating and thinking through, how do you explain this so that it comes through in the clearest way? It's really like technical writing to a large extent at this point. And it's something that is just very challenging to do and do well. And so there've been a lot of revisions and a lot of working through this. So it is coming, but it is a difficult challenge where there's some days you just think to yourself, wow, have I bit off more than I can chew, right? But I've thought this with every project I've done, and everyone has come out a success. So I'm hoping this is going to be the same deal. But yeah, it's a challenge, but we're getting there. We are getting there. So in the meantime, stay engaged, stay involved. We can't wait to hear more from you. We're going to be doing I keep saying we're going to do these. We are going to be doing a Q&A sessions. They're coming. We're going to be doing some focus groups and start really getting into it. And here's the reason why. As you might know, on January 7th, Gen Con event submission open. Now, we're supposed to have a finished game by August, by Gen Con, right? That's a lot of work. I think we can do it, but I'm going to be putting some events in. So at Gen Con, you will be able to play Cool Name RPG, and I will be running those events. So as we get closer, if there are other people who want to run some events as well, that would be awesome. But right now, I'm putting in a bunch of events that I'm going to be running while I'm there. So especially for the folks who, some of our higher pledge levels, I want to let you know that we will set aside time to run games that aren't part of the program, so that they don't have to worry about them selling out or something like that. We will save seats for you in a special program for that. But yeah, so event submission is here. It goes on, I think, till March for early event submission. So I'll be putting those in. Now, keep in mind that if you want to see me at Gen Con, you want to play some Cool Name RPG, Gen Con badge registration is February 11th. So mark it on your calendar. This is your chance. remember someone saying they sold out of badges last year. It's kind of shocking to me, but not beyond belief, right? And then event registration, May 19th. Now, somewhere in there is going to be hotel registration. I don't know where that's going to be. That's always its own Hunger Games type of experience, but we will, we'll notify you once we get the dates and share those with you as well. So those are important dates that are coming up. Gen Con's an important time for Cool Name RPG, and it's going to be a really big step for us forward as we sort of present this to the world and kind of show off what all of us have been working together to build and say, we did it, right? We pulled it off. So that is coming. All right, so that's the Cool Name RPG Design Journal. Hello to who we got here. They're showing me is a D. So hello, D. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. I'm going to talk about some of my other topics for the night. One of the things I wanted to talk about were comic books. Now, you might know I'm a huge comic book fan, and you might also know that I've been taking on the impossible marathon task of reading every Marvel comic in Marvel Unlimited. So, just a small challenge, nothing big. Marvel Unlimited is the digital comic service that Marvel has, kind of like Netflix for comics, which is DC has it too, and it's amazing, by the way, if you love comics. Marvel Unlimited, I started with Fantastic Four #1, and I've just been going month by month. And I've been reading. I am currently up to August of 1981. And what's kind of interesting about this is that we're seeing the evolution of comics as a storytelling media. Now, in the 60s, you had still this sort of comic strip vibe, right? In fact, most of the stories I always point out to people, if you look at them and read them, you'll see that they actually read like radio plays, which I have to think that's because Stan Lee and those guys grew up on those serialized radio plays, and it seeped into the adventures and listening to like the Superman on the radio and things like that, right? So you really had that vibe, a little bit of stiffness, more almost a stage play as opposed to a story. Lots of sort of gaps in the story where they just give you the broad swipes and figure that's good enough for the story. They're punching someone, we'll move on. But then, as we moved into the 70s, you started to see the stories evolve. This is when you started to see things like Captain America and Falcon dealing with issues of race and prejudice in the city and their relationship with one another. This is where you start seeing guys like Roy Thomas writing really powerful stuff that are just some really cool stories. They're a step towards where we end up, but they're only a step. Right? We're only just escaping from that concept, those early ideas. Now, the 80s is when, in 1981 especially, is when I start to see a real shift. And this is where I'm at the moment. This is when you're getting stories like the Chris Claremont, John Byrne X-Men stories, right? X-Men stories. These are amazing. In fact, Days of Future Past is a 1981 story series. So you're really seeing them start to delve into some deeper, tougher, richer stories and ideas. And it's very, very cool to watch. You also start to see folks like this show up. Frank Miller and his Daredevil, Elektra. Frank Miller's run on Daredevil is iconic, and he writes a completely different sort of story. Both him and Chris Claremont, you really see them writing stories in a different way than other comics have done in the past. This is also the same time when John Byrne takes over Fantastic Four, which is another amazing comics run. So this is an amazing time. I'm enjoying reading this a lot. Enjoying seeing things that sort of like undermine people's complaints about some of the MCU. Like they rewrote Moon Knight's entire backstory. And I'm like, guys, they retconned it multiple times in the comics. Like when he first came out, he was a criminal who they gave a suit to and told him to go fight a werewolf, which makes no sense, but that's what they had him do. Later, they retconned and said, oh, that was actually Moon Knight pretending to be a criminal, tricking them into giving him his own stuff. And there's this whole convoluted story. And I'm reading that going like, yeah, man, this is how it's always been. They have always been retconning and altering and changing the storylines. You also discover some things that were always there and you didn't realize it. Like the whole clone series that came out for Spider-Man at one point. I always was like, really, a clone? And then I read and realized that was one of the early Spider-Man stories. And I'm just like, you know what? It's always been there. It's always been like that. But here's the best thing that I've learned from comics so far. And I'm going to share this as a creative idea. The best thing I've learned from comics and from reading these Marvel comics is finish your piece of art, put it out into the world, and go to the next one. Don't spend time worrying about it. Don't spend time breaking your mind over, is it good enough? Have I done this? What are people going to think? Because I'm reading some of these comics and they are garbage. Some of them are garbage. They just, I shouldn't say garbage. They are not as artistic as others, right? Because, I mean, they're still all fun to read, right? There's some Ghost Rider stories that are pretty out there, but I still enjoy reading them. But the point is that they put it out there. And sometimes in the letters page, you see all sorts of people really annoyed, like, this is a terrible book. But then they just went and did the next one. And I think that's the trick. And what I've been trying to do lately, you'll see this on Mechanical Muse Magazine. You'll see this with Cool Name. But my goal right now is just to put this stuff out there. You guys can tell me what you think. And then I'll do the next thing. And we'll just tweak it as we go, because really at the end of the day, that's what Marvel did that I think made them so successful, is they just didn't stop. They just did another one. And each time they either got better, sometimes they backslide, sometimes a different thing comes out, but that's what made them a part of our sort of mindscape of our culture. So anyway, enough about comics. I have a couple of things to tell you guys about tonight. One is my book that I want to tell you guys about that I read, called The Power. This is by Naomi Alderman. Now, don't be confused. The Power is a television show on Amazon, which isn't a bad show, and it's based on the books. But as always, the book is actually better. It's a pretty amazing story. Margaret Atwood has a quote on the front, and it makes sense because it's got sort of the vibe of Handmaid's Tale, not so much in the sense that it's about women being pushed down as in Handmaid's Tale, but it's about the darker nature of humanity and the things that we can do and become if we aren't thoughtful about what we're doing as we're going along. And from that point of view, with a science fiction twist to it, it is a lot of fun to read. It's a really interesting book. And I think that if you enjoy Margaret Atwood stuff, you'll love this book. It's a great book to read. And then you can go watch the show on Amazon. It's not terrible. It's all right. It's kind of nice to see the characters come to life. All right. And I think that is almost it. I will check my list here, make sure I haven't missed anything important. Oh, a little RPG wisdom. I'm going to make this quick and easy, folks, right? So what I said was that this was going to be RPG wisdom, and the wisdom was say what you do. This is my advice to players everywhere. When you're playing a game, at a con, with your friends, anywhere that you're playing a game, when you want your character to do something, talk about what you want your character to do, not what you want to roll. Because oftentimes that gives the game master way more to work with in terms of how they can react to you, the benefits they can give you, the richness of the response they can give you. So if you say, I'm going to roll my climbing to get up the cliff, as opposed to saying, I'm going to look for some roots that I can grab onto to make it easier to climb up the side of this cliff, and I'm going to try to hammer in some pitons along the way so it's easier for my friends. That's a whole different story than I roll climbing, right? I roll climbing is not anything. I look for roots and scramble up the cliff as fast as I can is something else entirely. And then the GM can tell you what to roll or if you need to roll. There are going to be situations if you can tell the GM what you want to do creatively and in a story form, the GM might say, well, look, that's your character's a thief. You climb right up. It's easy for you. You don't have to roll at all. That's fine. The odds of you failing are like slim to none. So that's my advice tonight on RPG wisdom. Say what you do, not what you roll. And I think that everyone will have a good time. Hey, I want to say hello to Don Roberts, a good friend of mine who I gamed with for many, many years. And when he's talking about comic books, he putting out something that I thought was really, really clever, which is that if you think of comic books as a sprint in agile software development, if you think about it in iterative development, really it allows you to move forward without anything being like a sacred cow, right? It allows you to change the story in various ways because you're just moving on to the next thing each time and trying to do even better than you did before. Great advice, great take on that. And in the meantime, folks, that's it. Nice and quick tonight, 25 minutes and you're out of here. You can go grab a cup of coffee and kick back and watch your favorite show tonight. And in the meantime, thanks for coming. And I will see you all next week when I will be here.